another season of the Reintroduction Podcast. We are super, super excited this year to be launching this podcast again. We've been praying a ton, hoping that we could really do something this season that would be a blessing to you guys and be a blessing to us. We'd grow from one another. And today, we're really excited because we have an amazing special guest. But before I introduce him, I want to tell you guys a little bit about what we're doing this season. So, the focus and the theme of this season is on what it means to be human. And in order for us to really understand what it means to be human, we're going to be going on a journey together. And it's going to start from the beginning and work our way through the rest of this season in hope that we all can grow together to understand what it means to be human. So today's subject is not coincidence. We're on April Fool's Day, and the topic is called, Man, Why Do You Play the Fool? So in order for us to get to what this subject actually means, we are going to be bringing on our guest today, who is Father Joseph Dawood. Mina, we can bring Abuna on?
Abuna's on his way.
There he is.
Hey guys.
Hi, Abuna. How's it going?
Very good. How are you guys doing?
Good. Guys, let me tell you a little bit about Abuna Joseph. So Father Joseph is a priest from St. Mark and St. Mary of Egypt in Ottawa, Canada. He used to serve in Toronto. And he is the voice and the spirit of the Way audiobooks on SoundCloud. If any of you guys have listened to The Way of the Pilgrim or The Pilgrim's Journey or the Way or Crazy Mark or any of the audiobooks on the Way audiobook SoundCloud, this is the voice behind it. And I personally have benefited tremendously from that ministry. So we're super excited for Father Joseph to be with us today, all the way from Ottawa, Canada.
And you guys have asked us to bring on celebrities on the podcast. So here we are, starting off with the number one celebrity.
Starting low so you can build up, right? I like
that. It's so good to have you with us here, Buna. And we're very excited to have this conversation with you. Chris and I have talked about this, and with all our listeners here, we've told them about the idea for the season at the end of season 1. Is that season 1, we talked about God and the misconceptions about the character of God. And we figured it's only reasonable to talk about humanity after that. Because in today, we see basically that there's so much aggression, war, poverty, hate. We also see a little bit of goodness, but it makes you question, what was it like in the beginning? What was it intended to be? What was God's relationship with man? What was his purpose in even creating him? Was all this intended the way it has unfolded? So it kind of took us to this idea that, okay, we're going to take the season and we're going to break it up into 3 blocks in a sense, or 3 sections. The first section, we're going to talk about God and the relationship between God and man, but the focus is really man or humanity in general. And how does that unfold when we talk about man's dignity or his identity or his vocation? And then section 2, we want to talk about man's relationship with man, Adam and Eve, man and man. How did that unfold? What does it mean to be lonely? Was that always intentional? Only a couple of topics also that stems from that idea. And finally, because it is the trinity of creation, is creation itself, the created order, the environment and the animals and the created beings. What is the relationship between man and that creation? And what was it intended to be? And what did it turn out to be after the fall? So, and then the topics that kind of fit into that, environmentalism, consumerism, and so many other things that kind of fit into it. So we're starting with you because we want you to set the season straight. And we want to talk with you today about God and man and the relationship between God and man. And why did God even feel the need to create humanity to begin with in the beginning? So what do you think?
Cool. Okay. Well, I mean, to me, it always starts at the garden. If we don't understand the garden, we don't go back to Adam and Eve. If we don't go back to the purpose or the intention that God had in creating us, then we'll always aim for something far less. We won't understand our dignity. We won't understand our identity. And identity is huge these days because, I mean, kind of the most basic thing is people have been taught to believe whatever I think is who I am. And so we kind of live in this hyper weird world where I can actually identify as anything and be anything. And it's kind of crazy because we were created by a designer, someone who loves us and created us in love to be in union with him, right? And so going back to the garden is where it's at. But to me, one of the things that has really helped me is actually to look at the nature of other things. So I have a dog, right? I have a dog, and my dog, the way she behaves, okay, is so beautiful. I mean, she's way better than anything I can ever dream of being. She won't eat. No, no, really, really. Like, she won't eat until I get home, right? She won't. She'll wait. She'll cry if we leave. She's so faithful. Like I'll eat anytime, right? So it gets me thinking, if dog can be really dog, and it can, I mean, the nature of dog could be that glorious, what does it mean to be human? So I love that you're kind of focusing on this, and I think it has to start at the garden. Why did God create us? Why did He make us in His image? What does that mean? What's the dignity of the image of God? Well, before we even begin, I mean, we need to talk about, as far as being in the image of God, we need to start looking at, what sets us apart as Christians is our trust and our faith and our belief in a Trinitarian God, right? God as Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We know God as community. We know God as love. We know God as three persons, right? And we know that the relationship between the three persons uh, uh, actually really matters. It's one thing to believe in God as Trinity, but it's another thing to know God as, Trinity, and how that changes our lives and how we understand ourselves. And even more deeply, as humans, if we're created in His image, we need to know what this God who is love and this God who is community, who is personal, before we can even get to know ourselves. So, like, to me, I always start in the garden, and I start just before the garden to begin to understand who is God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. God as community, God who is love, God who self empties into the other, God who's self forgetting and pointing to the other. And we see this throughout the whole New Testament and the Old Testament, that the Father's always pointing away from Himself and kind of pointing to the Son. The Son is always pointing away from Himself, pointing to the Father and to the Spirit. And the Spirit is the one that makes us, adopted in the family of God. And so we have this kind of this icon, this image of what it means to be human, if we understand who God is as Trinity, right? The self-emptying, self-forgetting, self-denying God who points away from Himself. So in His pointing away from Himself as Trinity, He makes men in His image, so that we also would be self-emptying, self-forgetting, self-denying community. That's what it means to be human. There's no such thing as an individual human. He created us to be, male and female in the image of God, who is community, right? And so, who are we? Well, to be human is to be loved by God, right? Who are we is to be in connection with a God who made us like Himself, who wasn't, who didn't envy us anything. He didn't hold back anything from us, right? So He created us in His image, and I think that's lost on our society.
Bueno, when you just expressed all of those beautiful things, it makes me think a lot about how even the intention of God in creating us, we've lost understanding of that. Like, we have no idea why God created us. We often think that God just created us because He was lacking something, or He was bored, or He wanted to be this, like, angry God in the sky who wanted these puppets that He can play the ventriloquist, and has left us to just be His pawns for His, like, disposal. So
Yeah.
if we were to, like, I guess, synthesize God's intention for creating us, like, what would you say? Like, why did He create us? Was He lacking something?
No, I mean, definitely, He's not lacking anything, but yet love love is, I mean, love is the only answer. Self-emptying, self-forgetting love is the reason why he created us, in order to be um in order to be with him. I mean, why do parents have children? What's the intention for parents to have children? It's the desire for them to see themselves in another, right?
Mm.
To see themselves in their children, to raise one that they can be in communion with and give them everything that they have and everything that they are, right? And so, of course, God, who is love, who, we get to taste that and know that as parents ourselves, as people who want to, and we get to participate in that, right? So he so loves, and he is so much love that it kind of, it naturally comes out of him.
Mm.
I don't know, I don't like to go into these, like, these dialogues, within the Trinity
Mm-hmm.
before creation, saying, hey,
Yeah.
what should we do? I think it's just, God is, and because he is love, this is what sprouted out of him.
And I
Yeah.
think that's basically when we read throughout the early church, we read that the fathers pretty much reiterate that concept and idea that God was content, God is giving, and God is sacrificial, and he is so much love that it had to outpour into something else. And
Mm.
that's why creation in general, humanity, everything else is an outpouring of God's love and part of himself. It's not like when you order a kit of Lego for one of your kids to put together, that is actually he's creating something from outside of him. But with God, the idea is that everything is coming and everything is coming together, not from outside of you, but everything is from within, that you are loved, that you care, and you are happy to give and to take and to grow and to take your sons and daughters and everyone that's around you and kind of bring them on board. And that's this entire idea of why we're doing what we're doing. Um, and then we see that St. Athanasius says that the God is actually very happy to do all of that. It wasn't just something that has come out of the blue. It was something that he planned and is something that he wanted to do and something that he wanted to create. And he was very happy to do that with us and God. So we are here and we're happy to see that. Takes us to the second point. Chris, what do you think about paradise then? Like we talked about God and the intention in creation, but what's the concept and idea of paradise, and why did we even have paradise to begin with?
You know what?
Why didn't just create,
Mina,
just
what's
God?
just to rewind for a second, what's really interesting is I think we really have to express more that whole understanding that God wasn't lacking. He wasn't lacking, he wasn't bored. The whole idea of God being love, and this I think is a really important thing that a friend of mine one time expressed to me. He said that love is not exclusive, because a love that is exclusive is actually obsessive in a way. So
Mhm.
love that is exclusive is not real love. Love that is inclusive is actual love,
Mm.
right? So the Trinity, in the Holy Trinity's love for one another, the inclusivity of the Holy Trinity's love pours into us and invites us into that relationship.
Mm.
And that's the outpouring of humanity in that in the beauty of who we are today and the creation that God has manifest in us. So
Mm.
I think that that's just like an important thing. So when people talk about, we're in a relationship and we don't want to have kids, is that an inclusive relationship or is that an exclusive relationship?
Mm.
Because true love has to invite others in. Or is it a relationship where there are two friends that love one another and they don't want to invite others into that friendship? Is that relationship inclusive or is that relationship exclusive? And that's I think a really important point for us to hone in on the intention of God in creating humans, right? It's to invite us in to that Trinitarian love. So We had a few technical difficulties for a few seconds, but we're back on, guys. So Mina, go to the next question that you were just asking. Sorry, just to.
No, I was just basically saying, and that's and that's very true. Is that we're used to this concept of having everyone from having this separating wall between everything, and we think sometimes of paradise the same way. We've grown to think of the garden or paradise, whether it's pop culture, whether it's other religious opinions from other religions, that paradise is a fairy tale. This concept of the all-inclusive resort, that Adam and Eve were just running around and sipping drinks when they're not doing anything and sleeping in the morning, and that's what we lost on, right? We think we would have had it good if we were in paradise, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But we know that from the fathers and from the readings in the early church, that the when God envisioned paradise, he had a specific purpose for it, and he had a specific reason for Adam and Eve to be there that had to do with his relationship with Adam and Eve. So was paradise a fairy tale? Was it something that we are longing for, or was it something different? What do you think, Abuna?
No, I mean, I think paradise, simply put, based on what we were saying earlier, is this real living, entry into the life of the Trinity, right? We were in loving union with God, and actually we were in harmony with God. We were in perfect harmony with ourselves and with each other, and we were in harmony with creation. And in fact, because he created us in our image, in his image, and because humans were kind of in this place between the visible and invisible world, right? We're partly visible, partly invisible, right? That we're like, the angels are in the spiritual realm, the animals and the rest of the created world are in the visible world, and we're kind of in this middle place to communicate the life of the Trinity for the rest of creation. And that's kind of where we get that idea and that role of priesthood, right? Like humans were created to bring all of creation into the presence of God, to offer it all to him. And so, the idea of an all-inclusive resort sounds like hell compared to what we were what we were living in paradise, right? Because we were living in at the same frequency of God's love, the self-emptying, the self-forgetting, that like it wasn't about us. It was about this manikos eros, right? Like this crazy love that God poured into us and into all creation, by which he created everything. And we could, we were participating and communicating that love to all the animals and to all of creation, right? So very, very different.
Yeah. Chris, what do you think?
I always envisioned paradise as that. I guess as a little kid, when you read the little, you watch Superbook or you watch the children's Bibles, you see like Adam and Eve chilling and grabbing apples from the trees and chomping down on them and like talking to the animals and having like, I just imagined that it was this place that was like, yeah, a lot like an all-inclusive resort. But the more and more I've come to learn and read, the more and more I realize I know nothing. And the more and more I realize that oftentimes my perception of what things were actually not the way they were. And paradise, from my understanding and what I've read, is it was this beautiful harmony and potentiality that we had, that Abuna was talking about, this coexistence with God, where we are just walking and talking and in relationship with him. But we started as babies, right? And we were to grow in that relationship with him. And that growing in that relationship with him was also in our relationship and growing in our relationship with all of the creation around us, right? Like, in the garden, man had relationship with animals, man had relationship with the trees, man had relationship with all of things, and actually man named all of those things. Yeah. And we'll talk about that later in the season, but it was in this perfect harmony and oneness with God that we had a specific mission to, as Abuna was saying, to be priests, prophets, and kings. So we'll talk about all these specific subjects later, but maybe our orientation of heaven being an all-inclusive resort is one that we need to change, Paradise was not an all-inclusive resort where we were gluttons and just chilling and eating and lazy. We had a specific purpose in the garden,
Yeah,
What do you think?
some of the fathers will say that they break it down to like three. They say that one, that Adam. So the idea, okay, to backtrack a little bit, also to say, because sometimes also we think when we think about this, that Adam was created already in union with God already at his full potential, and it was a cruising relationship from that point onwards. But that only exists also in like a fairy tale scenario. But if we were to look at paradise as if God created his most precious being and he made him his son, just like when you go and you have your own son born in a hospital, or you choose someone and you love him so much that you bring him and adopt him into your own family, what you want to do is that you want to create the best environment for his nourishment, for him to grow without fear, without looking for food or worrying about what is he going to eat or drink, and being there to walk the walk with him every single day. And that's the idea of paradise, that Adam was not already created as already in his full potential, full union with God, but it was a journey he was supposed to take, and that journey was going to happen with God in a controlled, nice environment, which is paradise. But it wasn't supposed to be that God was and Adam was already there. And then the fathers say that, how was Adam really going to do that in paradise? They say, well, he would have had to listen to the commandment that God had given him not to eat from specific things, so he can understand discernment and to choose God. And then they say he had to acquire righteousness. And my own thinking, when I heard that, I said, okay, that probably has a lot to do with his relationship between like refusing evil when the serpent comes and proposes things, and like being able to say no to things. And they also say that he had to acquire virtue. And I think him living with Eve as his wife and caring for the animals, that's his journey into acquiring virtue and acquiring patience and love for creation. And that's the journey that man was supposed to undergo in paradise. That was completely interrupted by what actually ended up happening. But it didn't change it, because our purpose is still the same, right? Abuna, what do you think about that?
I was just gonna say, when you were talking, like, that is, exactly what our purpose is today. I don't think nothing's changed, right? We're called to live in harmony with God and with our neighbor and with creation. And I think we often forget about creation, to be honest. I know you guys are going to probably talk about that much later, but that's something that's really big for me, is our harmony with creation.
Yeah, and and we're going to definitely delve into that later on in the season. And also, it takes us to this point, Abuna, of discussing this concept of we a lot of times also we think, because we're again talking about the relationship between God and man, that Adam was kicked out of paradise, as if God just gave him the boot and he was like, out of here, you don't belong here. And this concept is also a lot of times reiterated when we're young, and we think of we think of exile and we think of these things, and because we use the word exile, but I think we misinterpret it sometimes when we look at this idea of Adam being kicked out of paradise. But did that really happen? And how did that really change the dynamic between God and Adam?
I mean, to be honest, I've always thought of it as, is did God punish Adam, right? Is this a punishment? And again, my frame of reference often comes back to parenthood, these because it's based on a real relationship, right? And so for me as a parent, if I was to tell, my daughter, whom I love, and I mean, the Lord is very clear. He says, if you, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children. If I, being evil, tell my daughter that I love to death and tell her, hey, that fireplace, you really shouldn't touch it, because if you touch it, you'll get burnt. Am I really punishing her? Or am I just kind of letting her know what happens? So no, I don't see God as getting upset with Adam and saying, "Oh man, you messed up. Okay, get out of here. I don't want to see your face." It's not like that at all. He kind of gave him the warning and told him, listen, it's gonna hurt. If you choose your will over mine, if you choose to, be independent from life, as Saint Athanasius like says, right? He says there's this movement away from life to non-existence, right? And so if you choose your independence, and if you choose to live on your own, you're going to be moving away from life, and so death is kind of the natural consequence to that. So yeah, definitely, like that was a big deal for me because I used to think of God as, Gandalf, sitting in the sky with a big white beard and throwing lightning bolts at people who didn't do what he wanted to do. And I was like, I realized that was Zeus, not God. Anyways, but so yeah, to me it was like when I realized that God was just telling Adam, like, this is the consequence. This is what happens. You can't step away from life and hope to not die. You can't unplug your battery and then hope it's gonna live forever. It's just not gonna. But the phone has the potential of living forever if it remains plugged, right? It has the potential, like you were saying earlier, Adam and Eve had the potential of growing into the likeness of God more and more. So when Adam chose to step away from God, he was stepping away from life. And that's the exile, right? He stepped away from his own existence, his own source, right? He stepped away from that love and that harmony.
Abuna,
Yeah.
what are the implications of that on us today? Like, I know a lot of people might be listening to this conversation and maybe saying, man, you guys are talking a lot of like theological stuff, and I don't know what you guys are talking about. You lost me for these first 25 minutes of this conversation. But like, what is like, okay, so we basically talked about God's love, his outpouring of love is us. And the outpouring of love in us, basically, he put us in this garden. We had specific purpose, specific intent. And then we just talked about.
I think we lost Chris for a second. You still there, Boone? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. I think what Chris was basically going to get to the point of what now? Like, we are talking about Adam and Eve and God and creation and this point. But what now? What is the point of all of this for us now? Don't worry, Chris. I filled in for
Exactly.
you.
What is the point of all this now? Like, what's the point of all this conversation that we're having? Like, what are the implications for Joe and Tom and Harry and Mary and Sally and Rebecca that may be watching this? What does all this have to do with our lives?
Everything in every way, to be honest, because there's nothing more, as a priest, there's nothing more heartbreaking than to connect with people who are tormenting themselves because they have kind of skewed vision of God, right? And so because God is even just in our psyche, in our being, when we think of God as divine, and we put him all the way out there, so far and so disconnected, and somehow he's always angry with us, right? This idea of God always watching out to punish us. I remember there was this picture of Baba Krolis when I was young on the hallway, and he was like frowning, and then if I was good he'd smile, but if I was like did something wrong he'd be frowning more. And it's the same picture, it's just how I saw it. Well, adults still do that, right? Like you mentioned, people are watching. I think what matters is to know that that's not who God is, and it's an encounter with the real God who is truly love, who is truly self-emptying, self-forgetting, self-denying, who actually so loved us that he did everything he can to access us, to save us, to redeem us, to restore us, right? So the glory and the dignity in which we were created, or the purpose for which we were created, we can never achieve without knowing our belovedness. When I talk to people, I tell them, like, your identity is actually hidden in Christ. What it means to be human is to know yourself as beloved of God. That's what makes you human. And how do you live that out is through thanksgiving, right? The restoration to our humanity is to become thankful for that love. I was talking to a good friend of mine, Abuna Carlos Murad. He's super cool. That's who you should have on this show.
We've had him.
But we were talking.
No, we had Abuna Anthony.
Oh yeah, Bruce Carlos is right.
Abuna Anthony's brother.
Yeah.
We were talking about what does it mean to be human, and we were talking about liturgy, and we were talking about what can man really offer God. And we sat there and we tried to think of anything that we have that we can actually offer. Time, well, no, that's his. My possessions, no, that's his. My life, no, I exist because of him. We tried to really figure out what it is that I can offer God, and we went back to the garden. The only thing we can offer is actually thanks. Right? And that means when I offer thanks, I'm in a relationship to this God who loves me. So who am I as a human? What's the point of all of this is to know that you're beloved. That's your identity, not your not your gender, not your job, which is hard for an Egyptian community. People identify themselves by their jobs, but your identity actually is hidden in Christ, and who you are as human is beloved. And how do you restore that humanity is to enter into a relationship of thanksgiving where everything is gift from him.
And that's it's I don't know if you've ever heard of the Paradise Lost, the series of poems written by John Milton. He's an English writer. He wrote 7 books into one poem about paradise and Adam and Eve and creation. And one of the things he says is that the one thing that Adam learned from his experience in paradise and took it with him to earth is that he learned how to take gratitude and convert it to obedience. And basically that this, like you said, there is nothing more that we can offer besides our giving thanks, our gratitude for what God has given us. And then once that is acknowledged, it automatically turns into obedience. If you already can attest to that and acknowledge that, that's what makes sense. And then it takes us back to this point, and it was a lot simpler than it wasn't. God is not out to punish or kill or do. Saint Gregory, the theologian, I think, says the whole thing is about, he compares it to a baby eating solids before he's ready to give up being breastfed. He's like, he just wanted to grow up too fast. God intended for him to grow up, to reach that potential with him. He just wanted to do it without him. And Irenaeus says that how does man want to become God when he hasn't yet become fully man? That was what Adam really tried to do. He hasn't yet perfected what God had given him, and to walk it slowly in that way. So it takes time, and it takes obedience, and it takes resilience and manifestation of love for us to do that. We have a question for you, Abuna, from the audience. If you can tell us what you think. Maggie's asking, do you think there is some component of theosis that rectifies the issue of being removed from paradise and unites us back to God?
What do you guys think?
اتفضل يا بينا.
No, the issue of being removed from paradise. I think the issue of theosis being rectified, when we talk about theosis, or we talk about the unity with God or union with God, we do acknowledge that was the intention from the beginning, right? But I don't want to say anything more before Abuna can say something, and then I can clarify, because the question is directed to you.
Look, loving union with God, entering into his likeness, that was the purpose from the beginning. It's not like it was a post-fall plan, right? It wasn't like, oh man, they messed up, let me fix it by giving them access to theosis, right? No, I don't know if that's the question, but I really do think that was his original plan from the beginning. And so no, I don't think it's something that was there to kind of rectify our fall. It's actually what has always been his purpose. Yeah,
agreed, because Athanasius says that even if there was no fall, the God would have still been incarnate. because how can you create
Yeah.
something and love it so much and not want to be with that creation? And God would have come
And
and dwelt among men.
yeah, and that's the progress you're talking about, right? It's the growth that we were intended for. Like St. Athanasius talks about how we were created with the potential, right, of becoming like him had we not fallen, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I'm going to give it's a complete off, and this is not a theological example by any merit. This is I guess, in a way to simplify it is, if your dad was the best heart surgeon ever to exist on the planet, and then he loved you and he took you and he wanted to teach you everything that he knew so that you can also become the best heart surgeon. But all of a sudden you said, no, I want nothing to do with this right now. I'm going to leave. You walk out of the house and you rebel and you do all kinds of things and you get into an accident and you die. So your dad has built this image of who he wanted you to be. He built this entire hospital because he wanted you to be in charge of it, which is like the rest of creation. But now there is a stumbling block. You're dead. He needs to bring you back to life, but then bringing you back to life is not his purpose. This is just the stumbling block that actually got in the way of his original intention of your potential. So the first step he takes is that, he puts you back on the operating table. He gives you his own heart and his own son, and he brings you back to life.
Yeah.
But then that starts your journey back to that full union with him that was originally intended, that some people refer to as theosis, or union with God, or any of these things that we talk about.
It reminds me of Ephesians 2, right, where he says how he made us alive first, then raised us up with him, and then seated us in the heavenly places with him, right? And just kind of what you were talking about earlier about the need to become human first. I think this is something that is necessary for us. Sometimes that gets masked with religion. We kind of become religious and we're not even human first. I have the opportunity of being with a lot of First Nations people that I call family up north in northern Ontario. We go to be with them every year. They really are family to me. And when I get there, I feel like I'm encountering real humans, right? Because we're sitting down, and my title, my position, my importance goes out the window. My phone goes out the window. There's no reception, and the way we sit down and we just laugh and we cry together and we sit around a table, and there's this real sense of being alive with them and being human, and we go for walks in the forest and go to the lake, and we're just being together. There's nothing to impress them with. The only question is, are you going to come back? I remember they weren't interested in anything else. Are you going to come back, or is this a one-time visit, right? And so to me, uh, I love being with them because I feel like I have so much to learn about God from just first being human. And we'll go fishing, and we'll make. Anyways, so there's something to be said about how sometimes we stumble in our spiritual journey because we refuse to be human first. We're too lofty in our heads, in our thoughts, and even in our theology. We're super lofty, we're super awesome in our minds. We've got the teaching on the Trinity packed. Yeah, I got it. But we can't even be human first. We don't even know what it means to look at each other in the eyes, and to just to be there. And so, to your point, I think that we're fooling ourselves if we're going to talk about theosis and all these things, if we can't care about you know an animal, or a human, or care about a tree and go hug a tree if you have to. Like, we have to first become human in order to become. And again, sorry to I'm rambling. I apologize. I promise I'll stop. But the idea is that we always say God became man so man can become God, but there's a deeper sense in which, yeah, God became man so he could show us what it means to be human as well, right? Because he is the theanthropos, the God man. in Christ we see who God is, no doubt, but we also see what Adam is, what Adam was meant to be. You know, we get to see what it means to be human, and that's why he's not a big fan of, you know, Phariseeism and duality and hypocrisy, and because all those things grow out of not being human. They all grow from, you know, this sense of creating an image for ourselves. So to me, like, it's so important for people that are listening to think of, before you want to kind of approach theosis, we should definitely approach becoming human like Christ, you know, so that we can join ourselves to his humanity, and then in him become like him as God, right? I don't know if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And that's a beautiful summary of what we're here to do, because we usually hang up our failures by saying we're only human. But we are human because God has actually intentionally created us as humans. And also we say that God created us according to the image of his son that was already existed before us, because he loved his son so much, and by adoption he loves us. It's not like he created us and then had Jesus be born and look like us. So he already loves us the way we're created, because he created like us like that intentionally. So there are physical limitations, but there's so much liberation in being human and having the understanding and potential to have the heart of God and mind of God, that we leave all on the table when we say we're only human. We can't solve these issues. We can't solve poverty. We can't solve loneliness. We can't. No, I mean, it's.
And I think, guys, we cannot be human if we separate ourselves from God. I think that is the crux of the problem in our current society today, is that we are trying so hard to live life apart from God. And as Abuna said to us earlier, right? God was like the sun and we were like trees. And the moment we turned away from God, the moment we started to decay. And how that practically plays out in our life is when we try to love others without God in the mix, oftentimes our love falls short and our relationships fall short. When we try to serve others without God, we end up, the cup ends up going dry. When we try to, you know, serve homeless folks, we get burnt out so easily, because we're trying to do things without being connected to the source of life, and therefore the source of life is what makes us human. Like and this is the whole point of, man, why do you keep playing the fool? Like, why are you being so foolish in trying to live life apart from God, thinking that you're going to do something beneficial with yourself? Like, man, I'll tell you guys, I'm the first person to confess this. I always try to do things and then ask God to join the conversation, right? Versus I've noticed when I recognize my frailty and I recognize I have nothing, like I'm literally bankrupt, that God is able, and I invite God into the conversation. I say, God, I'm nothing. I have nothing to do. Come in, do something here. That's when he's able to come in and actually transform everything that I'm doing. So if you're having problems in your relationships, ask, am I being human in my relationships by connecting to God more? Am I being, if I don't walk by a homeless person and feel any sense of compassion towards that homeless person, am I being human by connecting to the human, Christ himself, who taught us how to be human? Like, I don't want to get into these rambles, but I feel like this is the crux of this conversation. Like, why do we keep playing the fool? It's April Fool's Day. People are trying to fool us all day today with different things on social media. But like, man, I'm the fool. I'm the fool every day by thinking that it ended in the garden, that like Adam got kicked out and Adam walked away from God, but I walk away from God every day. So I guess for those listening, like, the whole point of this conversation is the garden is the starting point, but today is today, right? Like, what are we doing today to connect to the source of life, who redeemed us, restored us, and gave us the opportunity to do so? I don't know. What do you guys think? Abuna and Mina. Like, I just went on a rant because I get fired up a little bit sometimes, but forgive me.
Mina, what do you think?
Abuna, I can't. You got to go. This is a lot to process. There's a lot of.
I want to hear. I want to learn. I've learned already so much, to be honest.
No way, Abuna. No,
I
but
think I think that it's just like you're saying, like uh, a big part of being human is knowing, who you are and where you fit. And just kind of mentioning these big themes like solving hunger and solving poverty. I mean, Christ didn't do that,
mm,
right? We lose sight when we make any sort of ideal anything but the God man, right? Like
mm,
when it's not about seeking union with him, then we lose ourselves in committees, and we lose ourselves in organizations and what we need to do and what's the best, and then we lose sight of the person, the one, and that's it, is to know that I'm beloved, but to know that every single person is beloved, and to live in that smallness matters. That's how you're human. I mean, to be honest, like when I think of, if I could project manage the Lord a little here, if you're gonna come be incarnate, get rid of poverty, and can you like add to your agenda like dealing with political oppression, and can you deal with like, right? But what does he do? He's present. He's Emmanuel. He's God who is with us, among us. That's it.
mm.
That's it. So I mean, if I could be just practicing some presence and listening to people without judging, just listen to people. If I could just be real with people, not dual or try to project something that I'm not. And unfortunately, forgive me to say this, but like religion does that a lot. Right? And the most dangerous kind of ego is the religious ego, as we see in the New Testament, right? It's the idea that God is an idea, not personal. And then I could follow all these rules and feel really good about myself. That's not the gospel. That's not the good news. The good news is like that story that you're saying, the dad who makes him alive and then says, now come and learn heart surgery, right? It's the fullness of that. It's the fullness of that.
Mm.
So guys, what do we want to take home from this conversation? I learned a ton from the both of you. I mean, honestly, everything you both said, but what's our closing thoughts, so to speak? Like,
I think it's
That's all you
important.
mean.
I think it is important to acknowledge that today and now is no different than the created Adam in the way that God loved him. It's not like God looks at you any less or any different because of that sin. God loves you and God cares for you, and God shaped you according to himself and his image so that you can live a life according to him and be in union with him. And that takes time, and God knows that. And it's important that we know that. We don't grow impatient and we don't say this is too long or this is unachievable or we can't do it. And then we just turn our ways and say, I'm just going to do it my way. I'm going to do things my way. And we create systems, we create ideas. And yes, they accomplish some, but they will never accomplish their true potential unless you truly live in a selfless way to give in anything and everything of yourself. I remember there was a picture of a boy in Iraq that was circulating who was wearing he turned a garbage bag and he turned it into a windbreaker. And the comments on it were that at a time of crisis, there were multiple organizations on the ground helping when things broke out and things were happening and there was a lot of war. So people got there, they handed out a lot of jackets, handed out food. But then when the media left and the focus left, all the organizations ended up leaving as well. So the boys and the families that were getting used to people and the organizations helping them were left with not much, and they still had to figure out a way to fend off the cold and the wind. And this kid just ended up resorting to turning that out. And that's the kind of humanitarian work we end up doing when we are completely removing God out of the formula. And we say, you know what? Yes, you will accomplish something. Of course, yes, there's so much that happens. But what next? Like, how do you sustain it? How do you live your potential and live the potential for those who actually want to live and be like God and give them that opportunity? And I think in order for us to actually be humans, we have to consider that and think about it in all its facets and in humility, to know that we are a vital part of it, and man is central in this entire idea, but he's not the only focus. That the focus is the relationship between God and man to uplift the entire creation and bring it closer to God exactly the way it was intended in paradise.
Abuna.
I learned a lot, to be honest. I like both of you are super well read, and I'm not, and so
You are right. We're good parrots, Abuna. We can.
I'm a fraud, is what
I have Abuna. I have a plant behind me. You have a bookshelf. Who is the well-read one?
I learned a lot. I learned a lot about. Sometimes we get stuck in this idea of God came to give us His life, but it's not just that. It's the full restoration of His plan for us, right? And I've also learned that I don't know much about what that really looks like to be human. I could talk about it. I've experienced it a few times, but somehow, and maybe you guys can help me with this. Sometimes I think I find myself being a fool, like you're saying, and stepping away from just being present in the moment with a person that is with me, and kind of I get lost in ideas and thoughts and organization and to-do lists and all that stuff. So I feel like you guys are talking about a fool. Well, I feel like I've learned tonight that I'm a fool that can talk about things and not really well, but I need to go and be human properly. So yeah.
Man, you guys are something else.
We do have another question from Mina Solomon, saying, speaking of fool, what does one think of Fools for Christ? It would seem to me a big turn off at face value, and yet we place such a high status of holiness to them. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I love Fools for Christ. Are you kidding? They're like my favorite type of spirituality. It's like, to me, it's like it's up there.
I think at face value, Abuna, people like Amina's speaking right? At face value, people are like, who are these fools? Like, what's
Yeah, I love them. I love their stories. I'm like, sorry, I that's the language that speaks to me. Fools for Christ really speaks to me, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that I think it was in the Desert Fathers. It's like, if you can't escape the world, at least laugh at it, kind of thing. I don't know if you guys know that quote, but I think Fools for Christ operate on a different frequency, where they just don't care about anything but God. And sometimes, it's very much a prophetic voice that's very much needed in our day and age, where everyone's conforming to everything, right? Like, there is so much virtue signaling in our culture these days, even more than ever, right? And I love how fools just don't play with the rules. They just I love them.
they tune it out?
Hmm?
They tune it out. You're 100% right, Abuna. They just tune it out.
All that matters is God. That's it. And actually, Fools for Christ are probably some of the most liberated and the freest, in that they're constantly challenging and constantly pushing our own boundaries to make us wonder, how much am I relying on my own religious self-righteousness? How much am I relying on my goodness? These fools are just like, it's God. They're constantly pointing away. And yeah, I love them. That's not an answer. I apologize. You just
No, thank you. First of all, thank you both so much. I think you both shed a lot of really beautiful points today, and I think my take home tonight is, man, I have been a fool for a long time. Truly, like, I've been a fool for a long time, and I think, Abuna, you you hit a lot today for me that made me question, like, yeah, it's so easy for us to talk about different theological topics, but like, am I in the presence of God on a daily basis? Am I like, right now it's Lent, right? For the West, Easter's this week. For the East, we still got a while to go. And in that while to go, like, this is the opportunity, man. Like, this is the opportunity for all of us to lean into our relationship with God and ask ourselves, like, am I willing to operate in a different frequency? Like, am I willing to just kind of tune out all of the craziness that's going on around me and be the beloved? Like, be loved by God. Because honestly, like, so often I feel like he's just waiting all day, knocking and saying, hey, Chris, where you at, man? Like, I'm here. You want to talk? Like, there, it's like this personal, like, do you want, hey, what are you up to today? Like, I know you're going on, there's a stressful situation at work. Like, let's talk about it. Hey, I know that you're having this hard time with this person. Let's talk about it. And I'm like, shh, God, just be quiet. Just leave me alone. I don't have time for you. But he's like, hey, stop playing the fool. Stop playing the fool. Like, I'm here to talk to you. Like, I love you. You're my beloved. So just come in and have a conversation. And I don't want to be Adam no more, guys. Like, I don't want to be Adam. I don't want to like be trying to live life apart from the source of life. Like, I want to thrive. I want to be who God created me. People are talking about theosis here. I just want to be in the presence of God for just a moment tomorrow. Like, just a moment now. And I think that's like the starting point of becoming human. Just like these moments where we can have with God to just enjoy his presence. And I know the world needs it and I need it the most. So like, I just pray that, we could have the rest of the season to just tap into a little bit more humanity, but tap into a lot more God, because I think it's from there that we will learn to be human.
Amen to that. Thank you both so much, Abuna. We loved having you.
Abuna.
And we love that you would...
Abuna, I haven't met you, but I love you. I want to see you. I want to like, I want to grasp onto you. I want to, I love you.
Love you guys. Thanks so much for having me. I'm sure you never will again, but it was awesome hanging out.
No, we're going to have you on like 5 times, Abuna.
No, of course. And if you wanted to read some of the early church fathers on some of the things we talked about, there's a list of books you can take a look at whenever you get a chance here. And then we've got on the 6 days of creation by St. Basil, on the incarnation, St. Athanasius, and the commentary on Genesis by Didymus the Blind. These are a lot that can be heavy and dense, so this is not light reading. But if you're looking to learn more about what the early church believed when it came to creation and Adam and the fall and all these, they're good to check out. Abuna, if you have any other book you'd like to reference, please go ahead. But we thank you for joining us on this conversation today. We thank you for being part of this, for encouraging us to start season 2. We're excited to discuss all these interesting and crazy topics ahead of how to truly become, to be human, the way that God has intended us to be, not the way that we are kind of just going about it now, so that we can solve our problems, so that we can walk hand in hand into our own resurrection and to being again one with God in every single way. We ask you to please, if you have not yet subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. We love you. We'd love to hear back from you. Ask us questions like you did today in the comments, and we'll post them and we'll ask our speakers to contribute. Subscribe, follow the page.
Shout out to you, Mean, on this production stuff. This is the guys. We enhanced our reintroduction podcast.
It's very basic. We're trying.
Look at this.
We're trying.
We were on Zoom last season. Now we got pop-ups on the screen. We're moving on up in the world.
We love you. We want to hear from you. Please subscribe and follow the page so we can reach you more easily. And we look forward to having you at the next episode at the Reintroduction Podcast. And until then, rest easy, and we'll see you next.